We'd like to welcome back our guest speaker, Wen Thomas. Wen is with the Briggs Institute. She holds her master's in family and marriage therapy and brings to us the second series in Your Cafe. This presentation focuses on strategies to help us bring balance to the stress and anxiety that exist in our lives today. And I want to highlight that this presentation complements the first Your Cafe posting titled Stress and Anxiety in the Brain and its effects on your physical and emotional health. So welcome back to Wen, and thank you for joining us.
Today, I'll talk about going forward and applying some resources. So I'm going to hit again on burnout. We talked about that a little bit in the last session, but I just want to hit on that again and go into a little bit more detail about what that could look like in your life, and then talk about how to keep us out of that burnout by applying some different strategies. So we're going to talk about self-care, self-assessment, self-reflection techniques, and a few others today, and how to utilize these in your both home life and work life. So just like in the last time, I'm going to add in some COVID-19 applications for this, and so talk a little bit about home life as well, and work life. But since we are all at home and with families or friends, roommates, what that could look like in your home as well. And some of this you may have heard before. The term self-care is thrown around a lot in our society, but I'm just going to ask you to keep an open mind to the different techniques. They may not all work for you, maybe one that sounds better than the others, but they have all been proven to be useful and helpful to keep us out of burnout. So I just ask you keep an open mind to those things and think through how they could apply to your own work and or personal life. So the first thing we're going to talk about again is that burnout. Burnout is a state of chronic stress that can lead to physical and emotional exhaustion, cynicism and detachment, and feelings of ineffectiveness or a lack of accomplishment. When we are in the full-fledged throes of burnout, we're no longer able to function effectively in a personal or professional level. And something I didn't mention last week was that burnout does not happen suddenly. So you don't just wake up one morning and all of a sudden you think, I'm in burnout. It happens on a continuum, and sometimes it creeps up on us and it's hard to notice. So if we're not aware of what these signs of burnout are, it can feel like we wake up one morning and we're in burnout. But if we're aware of these things and that these are signs, we're better able to recognize it. Our minds and our bodies give us warnings to these. So if we know what we're looking for, we can recognize it, address it, and stop ourselves from reaching the full-fledged burnout. The difference between stress and burnout is a matter of a degree. So like I said, it's a continuum on that. So we may feel like it's just a little bit of stress, but then there's added things. You don't recognize it, all of a sudden you're in burnout. So I'm going to talk about the different signs and the different aspects. I'm just going to hit vaguely, just kind of go overview on these things. And I can go into more specifics. I have resources I can send, or if you have questions that you want to ask me about a specific one and how that could look at, what that could look like, I'm happy to address that. So the first are the signs of physical and emotional exhaustion. You have chronic fatigue, insomnia, forgetfulness or impaired concentration and attention, physical symptoms, increased illness, loss of appetite, anxiety, depression, and anger. So all those can be signs of physical and emotional exhaustion. And again, you may have some, you may not have all of those, but knowing what that looks like for your own level. Then these are the signs of cynicism and detachment. So you have first the loss of enjoyment. At first, it can just seem mild, but without attention given to that or intervention, it may extend to all areas of your life, including the time you spend with family and friends, or you may try to avoid projects at work or figure out how to escape work altogether. Pessimism In an early stage can just look like glass half full, half empty mentality, but later it can move and extend into trust issues with coworkers or family members and feeling like you can't count on anyone. Isolation early just may look like a mild resistance to socializing. So you just don't want to go out to lunch with coworkers or to dinner with family or friends. But without intervention, that can look like you're just angry when someone just speaks to you, or you may come in early or leave late to avoid interactions with others. And then detachment is a general sense of feeling disconnected from others or your environment. And it can result in removing yourself emotionally and or physically from your job or other responsibilities. So you may call in sick or stop returning calls or emails, or regularly come in late. And then our last section is signs of ineffectiveness and the lack of accomplishment. So that first one is feelings of apathy or hopelessness. So at the worst point, this may become feeling immobilizing and thinking, what's the point? You have increased irritability, feeling ineffective, unimportant, useless. You don't feel like you're able to do things as efficiently as you once did. And at its worst, it can destroy relationships and careers. And then lack of productivity and poor performance. So despite working long hours, chronic stress prevents you from being as productive as you once were, which often results in incomplete projects or an ever-growing to-do list. And at times it may seem like you can't climb out from under the pile. So it just kind of keeps piling on and on. So again, this is what burnout can look like. This is what we want to avoid for all of us. We don't want to be in a place where we feel those things. So what does that look like? How can we take care of ourselves to keep ourselves from that? So the first thing we're going to talk about is self-care. And again, this is a term that in our society gets thrown around quite a bit. So I'm going to break it down to some real tangible definitions and ways to do this. Some definitions that I like for self-care are self-initiated behavior that people choose to incorporate to promote good health and general well-being. The care that incorporates any deliberate move to look after physical, mental, and emotional health. So it can be a variety of areas. You see there's physical, there's mental, there's emotional, and we're going to break those down into what they all can look like. But self-care is more than just a checklist of things that you want to do. It is deliberate and it is intentional. And we have to take time to think through these different areas of self-care and how we're meeting those. So in 1943, a man named Maslow created this hierarchy of needs. And it's a motivational model that basically says you have to meet the needs at the bottom before you can go up to the next level. So he starts with physiological needs, working all the way up to self-actualization. So once our survival needs are met, the next level motivates us. We go into safety, then we go loving and belonging, esteem, and self-actualization. And a counselor recently took this model and made it into a self-care model that I think is really helpful as we think through conceptualizing what self-care is and could be. So she encourages each person to ask themselves different questions at each level, and I'm going to read some of those examples for you. So we start at the bottom, and we meet that need before we move to the top. So the bottom is take hydrated. Do you even have a sustainable definition of what adequate means in your life? Are you sleeping and are you moving your body? So we think through those questions, think through that level. When we move to the next level, do you have a home? Does that space feel safe and comfortable? Is it reflective of your preferences in a home? Do you have the resources you need to keep it? And that second question, does that space feel safe and comfortable? I think Right now, we're all spending way more time in our homes than we usually do. And so thinking through part of this time is, what in my home makes me feel safe and comfortable, and what do I need more of to meet that need? Because that is going to be so important to us right now, more than regularly, as we're in our homes more. What is the texture and the content of your relationships? Moving into that next one, healthy relationships and boundaries. Are they reciprocal in nature? Are your boundaries appropriately permeable and structured? Do you know what that looks like for you? Can you speak your truth to the people nearest you? Do they see you for who you are and what you are? Do you feel connected and accepted? The next one, knowledge of who you truly are and acceptance of that. What is your relationship to yourself? Are you connected to and accepting of your truest self? Do you recognize both your strengths and your liabilities? And are you able to reconcile those things? Do you love yourself? And then the last one is goals and upward, onward, forward motion. What does and how does all this come together towards the way you move through and strive for your best life? What is your spiritual foundation? Do you have a career that feels like a calling? What is your relationship with nature? Do you spend your days pushing towards fulfillment and deep meaning? So just like with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, this one is saying we need to meet those basic needs at the bottom before we're moving towards that upward and onward forward motion. And so often when we hear the term self-care, when people talk about self-care, we immediately move to that top one. You know, what's fulfilling in my life? What do I need to move forward? What are my goals? And while that is important, we also need to make sure that those bottom levels are met, so that we feel safe and secure. We're taking care of our bodies and our mind and the relationships that are around us. And then this is something that I will email as a resource. It's a self-care wheel, and it's really practical. I use this a lot with my clients because, again, we can go through this and we can think through those questions, and then sometimes we hit a spot of like, okay, but what do I do to meet that need? What is that actually going to look like? And this just has a lot of basic things to help you think through. So if it's physical needs, eating healthy, exercising, massages, bubble baths, there's a bunch of different options there. If it's spiritual needs, looking at that. So this is just a great way to conceptualize all the different levels of self-care, and give yourself easy, quick, okay, I could try that today. This is also great with just families. If your kids are feeling like they need some kind of self-care, being able to say, let's try this, let's try painting, or having a bubble bath, or what does that look like. I talk to self-care a lot with my play therapy clients when I talk with parents, because as adults, we're not always the greatest example of what self-care looks like. And right now, you're at home with your family more. And so to be able to lead by example with this and show what self-care looks like will be something to carry into their adulthood. Parents feel a lot of guilt when they're doing something for themselves and not for their kids. And I tell parents all the time, if you're not your best self, you're not mom to those kids, or your best husband or wife, your best dad version of yourself. And taking that time, even if it's 30 minutes, to be able to be filled and be the best person you can be is so key. And with work too, taking part of your lunch break to do one of these things, so that I have a stressful afternoon and I want to make sure I'm filling myself up so I'm the best version of myself in this meeting this afternoon. So then goals. I'm sure everyone is very familiar with this model of SMART goals: specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. And this is just a great model to look at when we're thinking through goals. So thinking through what your self-care goals would be for yourself as you look, if you think through these questions, or you look at this wheel and you say, I would like to have more of that, and I would like to have it, I would like to walk more or do something exercise wise, and I want to be able to work up to running 2 miles. And so how am I going to achieve that? What's that realistically going to look like? And when exactly do I want to accomplish it? We're very familiar with this model, but I just wanted to put it in here to remind us that we do need something to work towards, and we do need to sit down and think through what our goals are so that we know what we're working towards. However, there has been some research that shows that reflection and self-assessment are more important than formal plans. And that's because we're forced to think and engage a lot more with self-assessment and self-reflection. So we're forced to do a lot more critical thinking than we are necessarily with goals. I do think it's important that we take time to think about what our self-care goals would be for ourselves. So I wanted to include that as well. And now we're going to talk a little bit about self-reflection and self-evaluation. So our self-reflection definition is going to be that we seek insight about ourselves and our behavior, values, knowledge, and growth. Self-evaluation is used to study our performance in order to improve it. So we're all familiar with job evaluations and what that looks like in work life, but forcing ourselves to take time to reflect about what's going on with ourselves, with our behaviors, with our values, our knowledge, and our growth, and then studying our performance in order to improve it. So really, these things do go hand in hand with goal setting. It's just the process of how we set those goals may look a little bit different. Because with self-reflection and self-evaluation, again, we're forced to sit and to think about what's going on within us. Now, as humans, we don't always do this well, and there's a lot of things that keep us from doing this. So I wanted to run through a few of those things and then talk about how it would benefit us and why it is important. So reflection and self-evaluation require us to do a number of things that we don't typically like to do. One is slow down. One is adopting a mindset of not knowing and curiosity. One is tolerating messiness and inefficiency, and taking personal responsibility. And sometimes these things can lead to feelings of discomfort, vulnerability, defensiveness, and irritation. We become defensive with ourselves when we don't like the results that we found after spending time doing these things, or we dismiss our strengths and we focus on our weaknesses. We don't take into account the things we're doing really well. We're just focusing on the things we're not doing well, which is not going to leave us feeling great about ourselves and is not going to make us want to come back and do this again. So I'm going to talk about why they're important and then practical questions that you could use in that time. So again, I'm going to ask you just to keep an open mind about these things and think about what that would look like in your life. So we have job evaluations once a year or every quarter or 3 times a year, whatever it may be. So is there once a week where you could spend 5 to 10 minutes thinking through what's going on with yourself? Is there at the end of every month or the beginning of every month? Or is it quarterly for you? It may look different. It will look different for everyone, but it's important, and I'm going to go into that. So there are 2 research studies that I wanted to mention that have studied self-assessment and self-reflection. The first demonstrated that employees who spent 15 minutes at the end of the day reflecting about lessons learned performed 23% better after 10 days than those who did not reflect. So this study was done in call centers. And I just think both of these studies I love research because it's hard to argue with research, and we can see this actually works. So we're not throwing darts and just guessing what's going to work for us. We know based on research that these things work. So 23% better in 10 days by spending 15 minutes at the end of the day reflecting about lessons learned that day. And then in the UK, they had commuters use their commute time to think about their plan for the day. And they found that those commuters were happier, more productive, and less burned out than people who didn't. So just spending your time driving to work to think about your plan for the day, what you'd like to accomplish, where you feel like you're at on certain projects or with certain relationships, can lead to feeling happier, more productive, and less burned out. Right now, we're not commuting, but we still have time. We have more time now to do things like this. And so it's a great time to put these things into practice, I think. Taking this time gives our brain an opportunity to pause amidst chaos, to untangle and sort through observations and experiences, and to consider multiple interpretations and create meaning. We can feel more grounded within ourselves. We perform better at work, and we're more productive, we're also happier and less burned out. And those are really powerful results. And we talked a little bit last week at the end about different COVID things, but one thing as a society that we've noticed we're struggling with is that slowing down and staying still. We really like to be moving forward, but we're learning how to do that, how to be still. And this whole practice is about that, just taking time. So is it every day? Is it once a week? Is it writing it down in a journal? Is it just thinking with your spouse or a friend or a coworker, and just talking to each other about, here's what I've learned this week. Here's what I think I could do better. Here's what my goal is moving forward. It may look, again, it will look different for everyone, but finding what works for you. And we're going to get into practical ways in a minute. These are some self-reflection questions. And again, I can send these and the self-assessment questions out. But these are just some basic, if you Google self-reflection questions, you will find lots. You can Google self-reflection questions for work, for family, for home. There's a lot of resources out there. But just some basic things, because sometimes it can be intimidating to just sit down or to just stop and think. Our minds can go a million directions. So having some questions, where's my attention going? What is the most important thing that I do? What is most important that I do? What am I grateful for? What do I need to let go of? And then self-assessment questions are similar. Is my routine serving me well? What resources and support could I use going forward to help me reach my goal? Is there anything in my plan that should be adjusted? So again, these questions are looking at goals and how to meet those goals, but in a deeper way where you are thinking through, critically thinking about yourself and about what's working and not working. So a little bit deeper levels in those SMART goals, although helpful to use that or a model to set a goal and then use this to go a little bit deeper. So some practical steps to reach this. You know, we've heard it's important, but what do we do? So the first thing is guarding that time, setting boundaries. There's a therapist that I work with that says, if it's not in your schedule, it doesn't exist. And that's a good way to think about this. We're going to find a lot of different things to fill that time because, again, it doesn't feel efficient. It doesn't feel like we're moving forward if we're sitting and thinking. So we may have to remind ourselves of some of that research or try it and see if it's benefiting you so that you can say, this is worth it. This is helping me. But guarding that time and scheduling it, putting it on a calendar, schedule time. If you need, just put it on your Google Calendar or whatever so that it is there and it is guarded. Recognizing the need for it. We spend time taking care of others, our jobs, our homes, but we don't always prioritize ourselves and our minds. So recognizing that need for it. And then accountability. Studies have shown that individuals may abandon self-care when overwhelmed or when they feel that they're not supported. And that performance of self-care can be influenced both positively and negatively by the attitudes of others. So I'm gonna get into a minute about at home and kind of work culture, but having people that can keep you accountable on this, or that are doing it with you, coworkers that are going to try this and be able to have conversations with each other about what's working, what's not working, what's your biggest struggle, what do you feel like you're able to do really well. So having people and asking for help when you need it in these areas, asking people to keep you accountable or asking feedback. How is that working for you, or what mindset do you get into that's helping you? Find the process that works for you. So again, all of these things may not work best for you. There may be one that works best, but finding, is it when I go on a walk, I think about this. When I'm driving, I write it down. I just think about it. I talk about it out loud with someone. Whatever works for you, because that's going to keep it going and keep it a part of your routine, is that it works and you enjoy that time. And to be realistic about your limitations, to be authentic with yourself and have the courage to say, I really want to do all these self-care goals, but realistically, what's going to work for me right now, or what's one or two that I really want to focus on. And so my time goes there. That is one reason why I love that SMART goals model, and it's because it's so practical and it makes you think through your limitations and what is achievable and realistic for what's going on with you right now. And then start small and build up. Again, limitations there, start with 3 to 5 minutes and then build up to 10 minutes, or start with one goal and then add a few others. Find what works for you, but start small and give yourself grace along the way. When you schedule it and it doesn't happen, I'm going to try again tomorrow. I'm going to try again next week. So give yourself some grace in that way. And then these are just some self-care apps. There's a lot out there, but these are a few that I've used or have clients that have used, and can work to set daily self-care reminders for yourself, to set goals for yourself. If you want to try meditation, there's a few on there. If you want a habit tracker to be able to see what you're actually making a habit or not, a gratitude journal, that is a great way to kind of reset your mind. And then some screen time control and what you're spending your time on, and redirecting that into looking inward, meditating, taking care of yourself in different ways. And so then some COVID-19 applications here. We're all going through this together. I wanted to mention a study that a man named Dr. Mark Barnett, what's his last name? I forgot. Brackett, Dr. Mark Brackett, has done with the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence. They, in 2017, they asked 5,000 teachers to complete a survey that had them describe in their own words the 3 most frequent emotions they felt that day. So in 2017, the top 5 emotions were frustrated, overwhelmed, stressed, tired, and happy. They redid the survey at the end of March, the very last week of March they did this, and the 5 most mentioned feelings were anxious, fearful, worried, overwhelmed, and sad, with anxiety by far being the most frequent mentioned emotion. Their reasons were mostly around COVID-19, but also around managing their own needs and the needs of their family while working full time. And I think we can all relate to those emotions and that feeling of, I have my own emotions going on, I have my own work to manage, but I also now have my family's or my roommates or my friends' emotions that are going on, and their schedules, what they need, and what's going on with them on top of all my stuff. So I just wanted to show this to normalize that of 5,000 teachers, these were the most mentioned feelings. And I don't think that's just teachers. I think a lot of us are feeling those things. So their research, as part of this study, their research showed that the more developed emotional skills you have, the less burnout you report and the greater job satisfaction that you feel. So the challenge is that most of us have not received formal education in emotion skills, how to manage emotions, what that looks like. And so Dr. Brackett came up with a acronym that helps us to deal with our emotions a little bit better. So I wanted to share this. The acronym is RULER. So the first is recognize our emotions accurately. And I'm going to talk about that in a minute. Then understand the causes and the consequences of our emotions. Label our emotions precisely. Express our emotions comfortably, and regulate our emotions effectively. So thinking through labeling and identifying our emotions. That's something we can all do, and we can help others around us do. And this is a feelings wheel, super helpful, and I'll email this as well. But this is a great thing. There's a lot of different versions of this, feelings charts with different faces. A lot of times we just don't have the emotional vocabulary that we need to truly express what we're feeling. And so I love using this one because we tend to just go to a few, like happy, sad, mad, scared. But this really breaks it feelings under that category, which really focuses or makes us focus on what we're truly feeling. So I could say I'm feeling scared, but really I'm feeling helpless or insignificant or discouraged. Saying discouraged is so different than saying I'm scared. And not only does it help us to be able to know what's going on within us, being able to communicate those to the people around us, that label our emotions and express our emotions comfortably. So I tell people, put this on the fridge at work, put this on the fridge at home, and be able to say, what I'm really feeling is this. Growing up, my mom had these placemats. She is an accountant, not a therapist, not necessarily into emotions, but she had these placemats, and they were dry erase. And when we sat down at dinner, there's a dry erase marker, and we would circle the face that we were feeling. And that clued everyone into what was going on with our day or what was happening. And we could choose to talk about it or not talk about it, but everyone was aware of what was going on. And so this is an easy way to do this at work or at home, is to have like a whiteboard next to a feelings wheel or a feelings chart, and for everyone to write down under their name, today I'm feeling frustrated and helpless or hopeless or confident, thankful. So sometimes we feel two things that feel really different. So some people right now, I've heard a lot, I'm so thankful for this time with those I love, but it also feels, I feel really anxious as well. So knowing that we can hold two emotions at the same time is really important, not just for adults, but for kids too, to be able to know it's okay if you feel things that are on two different sides, just to be aware that that's what you're feeling. Dr. Brackett has a new book, and he talks about, so often we ask people, how are you feeling? Hoping that they say fine and we move on. Because if they said, I'm feeling really inadequate, inferior and inadequate today, what are we going to do with that? Do we have time to even be able to stop and deal with if that was their emotion that they said? But how different would it be if we were open to having those conversations and labeling what we were feeling? Being comfortable expressing that to others is a big part of this. So that's a challenge for everyone, is to be able to think through, maybe it's after you get off a work call, before you start your next one, you take a breath and you ask yourself, how am I feeling right now? And you look at this wheel and identify, that's what I'm feeling. Maybe you need to do something about it. Maybe you just need to know, checking in, okay, that's how I'm feeling. It just takes a minute, but rarely do we take the time to do that. And then this also, Dr. Gottman is a marriage and family therapist in California who's done years and years and years of research on couples. And he posted this on Instagram the other day, and I just wanted to share this in our times we're living in right now. It says, friends, family members, and partners do better when they agree to hear and respect one another's point of view in these uncertain times. Create safe places in your relationships, families, and support systems for people to be open about their perspectives, which include their concerns, feelings, and needs. So again, what would this look like at work? What would this look like at home? To have intentional time set to hear how other people are feeling, what their needs are, and what their concerns are. Maybe they want to go into more detail. Maybe they just need to say, today I'm how could you apply this to both work culture and home culture, especially right now, starting work calls or Zoom meetings with, hey, let's go around and everyone just say how they're feeling. It may sound really silly, really childish, but we need to be checking in with those feelings in these uncertain times, and we need to attend to those and be in tune with what other people are feeling, especially those of us who are living in close quarters with people, family members, friends, roommates, to just be aware of what's going on with others. In the study that I mentioned before, along with showing that more developed emotion skills lead to less burnout and greater job satisfaction, they also found that those who worked with an administrator or boss with a more developed emotion skill tend to experience fewer negative emotions and more positive emotions. So taking time in work settings to talk about, hey, everyone just go around and say how you feel, or is there something that a need of yours or a concern of yours that you just want to voice out loud? Creating that space for people leads to more positive emotions and just a better work environment overall. There is also a great article that Dr. Brackett just put out about applying some of this to families right now, a blog post, and I'll include that in the resources as well if those of you with families want to look at that. But I hope you have seen a myriad of different ways that you can apply this, apply these different things, and with a lot of information. So remember, start small. Think about one thing from this that you want to apply and start applying it. Then look at something else, and then look at something else. And keep in mind this chart of self-care, to not get too ahead of yourself, but meet those needs, go into safety needs, go into relationship needs. And that's, if you're feeling overwhelmed by all of this, this is a great way to conceptualize, what do I want start working on and then move to the next and the next and the next. So I hope you guys have been able to hear something that will be helpful for you during your times right now.